My name is Danny Thurber. I am a reference librarian here in the Hispanic Reading Room of the Library of Congress. And I'm actually here in staff space. I'm in my office in the Hispanic Reading Room. I serve as the Latino Studies Collection Specialist. And I'm here today to share some of the progress and milestones regarding the library's Latinx resources and collections. In particular, I'm going to talk about the Latinx Alcove, which is our most recent initiative, which we unveiled this past October. And for my presentation today, here's a little overview. We're going to talk a little bit about the Hispanic Reading Room, background and project origin for this particular initiative, the Latinx Alcove. I'm going to share a little bit about the digital resources and services that we developed kind of as a preface to the Latinx Alcove. We're going to talk about the term Latinx and how we explored it in this space. And then I'm going to share kind of the nitty-gritty of a library being built, a collection being created. So that's going to be in the collection development, and then how I navigated the physical space in space development. And then finally, I'm just going to mention how our goal is basically to foster belonging in our particular library space. So to start with the Hispanic Reading Room, it is absolutely one of the treasures here in the Library of Congress. It is located in the Jefferson Building on Capitol Hill, right across the street from Congress. It is the first area studies reading room that was established back in 1939. And the room is just a beautiful space to study and explore the library's collection. If you've ever visited the Jefferson Building, the entire structure is just unbelievable inside and outside. It is an architectural marvel. But the Hispanic Reading Room, we all say it kind of stands by itself. It stands out. It is a space that it just speaks to what we're trying to do in our area studies focus. And by the way, I should mention there are 21 reading rooms and research centers in total in the Library of Congress. It's 3 buildings in Capitol Hill. We have offsite storage, offsite facilities. We have a center that focuses on the audiovisual resources, which is in Culpeper, Virginia. And on Capitol Hill, we have the main kind of library, which is the Jefferson Building. That's where you have the main reading room. And then across the street, the Adams Building, that was our second edition. And then the Madison Building, which is the newest construction that was erupted in 1983. This building is from 1900. So that kind of tells you this one 1900, that one is the 20s. I believe it opened in 1930. And then the Madison Building in 1983. And what is the Hispanic Reading Room? It is the primary access point for researchers working with the library's collections that relate to the Caribbean, Latin America, Spain, Portugal, the indigenous peoples of those regions, and people throughout the world historically influenced by Luso-Hispanic heritage. And if we know our history, you're participating in this conference, so I know you do. That really includes most continents, kind of every corner of the planet. And significantly for this presentation, the Hispanic Reading Room also serves the Latino and Hispanic community in the United States. On the screen, I share here the architectural drawing rendering of the room, the original design, which was created by the architect Paul Philippe Crête, who also designed the Folger Library, the Shakespeare Library across the street. And I think he also had something to do with the plan of the University UT Austin. So he's well known and has created beautiful spaces. Here is just more photos of the Hispanic Reading Room to kind of show you what the space is all about. As you walk in, you are greeted by a place that was thoughtfully created to with the cultures and histories that it needs to represent. So you can immediately catch the references to Latin American, Iberian art and architecture. They're not depicted in these photographs, but the foyer, the entrance to the space. We have four stunning, colorful murals by the Brazilian artist Cândido Portinari. And then you walk in and you're throughout the walls, there are these talaveras that came from Puebla in Mexico. It's just happened this Wednesday. We had a class of fifth graders, and they came in, they were visiting, and they told me that it reminded them of the casita from the Disney movie Encanto. So that's really the feel. You're transported to Latin America, you're transported to a different time. The high vaulted ceilings and arches, they are put together with white plaster. That also recalls the Spanish and Moorish tradition and influence. And along the walls, you can see here at the top, there are the names of Luso-Hispanic literary greats. On this side, I believe is Miguel de Cervantes, Luis de Camões, and Rubén Darío, among others. And along this wall, the western wall, if you see on both of the right of the images, there are the 5 alcoves which house the reference collection, and that's really where the Latinx alcove kind of took on after the reference collection. In addition to the reference collection, we also edit, review, and create the Handbook of Latin American Studies, which is an annotated bibliography of work selected and edited by over 100 scholars, and the actual bibliography is edited by librarians here in the Hispanic Reading Room on the second level up here. And we also curate the Palabra Archive. It used to be known as the Archive of Hispanic Literature on Tape, and it is one of our most popular resources here. It is a collection of authors and poets reading from their work, and we have their voices captured. And this is a project that last year turned 80, and we are still recording authors, we are curating, we are digitizing previous recordings. So just to let you know, kind of show you the different things that are happening in the space, in addition to it being research, a study space for users, researchers, students to come in and use request materials from the collections and have a quiet, your traditional quiet library space. So now that we have that history and kind of spatial context of the Hispanic Reading Room, I can tell you about the various and relatively recent projects and initiatives to expand the Latinx collection and spaces at the Library of Congress. I say recent because these changes have taken place in the last 4 years. So if you think back 4 years ago, yes, it was 2020, and that was another major event. But it began with new staff that came in. If you walked into the Hispanic Reading Room today, this image shows what it looks like right now. We have new furniture. We have made an effort to create distinct spaces inside the reading room. So we have a communal table, we have some sofas, inside the alcoves there are individual desks. We call them kind of study cocoons for users who are interested in kind of being separate from the larger space. But 4 years ago, it looked like this. It was a completely different experience. The angle of the photograph and lighting is different, but I hope you can spot the differences in terms of how there was less variety of seating options in the back of the room. These were staff spaces that would kind of mix and crowd what is user spaces. And thanks to those broader shifts of rethinking the space, we've sort of all kind of had to reconceptualize what the Hispanic Reading Room is and what it could be. And I want to shout out our division chief, Dr. Suzanne Shadle, who really led this initiative to rethink the space, reconceptualize the space. And I can also point to an exact moment when it was clear to me that the space needed to change. I want to say this was late summer 2019. We had a request. I was a brand new librarian. I had just been hired that year. And I got a request to show Latinx resources to a group of librarians. And they specifically asked, we want to see what you have that's related to Latinx. And I did what any librarian would do. They checked the catalog, and I consulted with senior librarians and curators. And I remember there were just a handful of resources that would come up in a search. I think literally I could count maybe like 10 or 12 in total. And for this being the largest library in the world with over 30 million books, it really kind of was a shock to see that, okay, maybe we had some gaps in the collections, or maybe we had resources that didn't immediately pop out as being Latino studies, Latinx related. And again, I want to mention, this was happening on the eve of what happened in 2020, the pandemic. So we were going through these changes, we were rethinking the space, we were moving furniture around, and then of course we had to stop. We had to go home. We have to work from home. And so I want to fast forward a little bit. We don't have to relive the years of the pandemic, but during that time, like many cultural heritage institutions, we were separate from our on-site work. We were working from home, we were teleworking, and that led to some pretty significant shifts in the way that we do archival work and librarianship, and how we practice our profession in our space. And these changes have taken place not only because of the strategic priorities that the Library of Congress as an institution has adopted as a whole, but also as a result of the new tools that we have in the digital environment. The most significance of these, we really set out. While we were at home, we started creating research guides. They're also known as lib guides in the profession. We dabbled in podcasts. We put out webcasts. Story maps is another digital tool that we've adopted. And we also sought internal and external collaborations. Sometimes a library space, you are kind of grounded by the space. So you focus on physically what's happening here. And while we were offsite, we weren't limited. We could reach out to anyone in the world, anyone across the country, and kind of start collaborating. We created a couple of tools, research guides and story maps, thanks to those collaborations. We continue our recordings with authors and poets for the Palabra Archive, and we also expanded our research orientations to happen in a digital environment. And we also, most significantly, I'm not going to talk about it too much, but we began to really focus on web archiving projects in the library as a whole, but for our division, we kind of got started during those years of the pandemic. And this image here is really the most significant resource that we published and put together. It's called a Latinx Resource Guide, Civil Rights Cases and Events in the United States. And I should talk a little bit more about it later. But for now, I want to show you uh, what we created. So we established the Hispanic American Studies subject under the research guide. And since 2020, really, we have published 40 guides. And some that I want to highlight that are out there, if you're interested, the Latinx Civil Rights Guide, which I mentioned, the Latinx Studies, kind of a general guide to learn about what the library has and what materials are digitized or available online. We also published the Afro-Latinx biography, and most recently, last summer, we put together a Latinx filmography. We basically compiled every single film that had significant Latino representation. So those are kind of some of the resources that are out there and that we've been able to put together in the past 4 years. Yeah, to the date, 4 years. And now to go back and highlight the Civil Rights Guide. This guide we published October 2020. And it just exceeded all expectations. It is incredibly popular. Right now, it is the second most visited guide out of 1,700 guides that we've published. And that really showed us that these kinds of resources, these topics, were significant, were needed. And of course, as they were getting noticed, it told us that highlighting heritage themes, topics, and collections was important, and that there was an audience and definitely a need to have these resources. And with the success of that, we got we hit the ground running to explore Latinx. And the term Latinx, of course, it can be controversial, but we really looked at it as a term that users, researchers, students were putting into the online catalog. They were using in Google, they were searching for Latinx, and what they were finding as they were looking for scholarly resources, it really wasn't there. So that was a space that we could really shine, and we could use the term not only for its significance as a gender neutral term or to be inclusive in the language, but also because it's the term users need. In library science, you focus a lot on how to describe something. You have thousands of books, millions of papers. How do you describe something perfectly so that the person who will search for it 10 years from now can find it? So that's kind of how we've used the term Latinx. While we were publishing these sites, as I mentioned, there was some pushback, but also it was welcomed because, like I mentioned, if you searched Latinx before, we had 10 results. And now if you search for this term in our catalog or any of our databases, you'll get all of these different resources that we've put together. And so I want to go back and kind of highlight that original reference request that came in about Latinx resources. Now we were able to fulfill that in the digital space. So we published research guides, we published story maps, we published blogs, webcasts, you name it, we had it out there, but in the digital space. So with this popularity, what I set out to do, what I wanted to accomplish is to create this same experience, but in the physical library space. And as a librarian, I want to create a physical collection. There was a space available already. So a little bit about my career is that when I came to the Hispanic Reading Room, my desk was in the very first alcove. As you walked into the Hispanic Reading Room, this is what it looked like. And I had already kind of started building my own reference collection to serve as quick tools that I could easily grab at my desk for questions that I had tackled. So I told my supervisors here that, if I wanted to do this, the space was available. If I could do it, that it existed. I just needed to move out and find find another desk space. So I began this process when we got back. I want to say 2022. At the start, late 2021, start of 2022 is when this really took off in terms of getting the space ready and starting to build this collection. And the very first step was the collection development process, or how do you build a collection in already the largest library in the world, where we have almost 30 million catalog books on the shelf. And I'll share a little bit about how we built the collection. So the library acquires through acquisition and through copyright deposit. As a national library, we get a copy, publishers, creators, they send a copy of their work so that they can attain copyright. So we have a lot of resources already. So what I needed to do was transfer those materials from the general collections to the reference collection space. And I keep mentioning over 30 million items because it's true, but the task was really to search what was significant to a Latino studies focus. And so I created a kind of selection criteria. What I wanted to do the most was to get input from our community members, users, researchers, scholars, librarians, anyone I could chat with about the Latinx Alcove, the Latinx reference collection. I emailed, I called, I stopped by in the hallway to ask them. I basically asked them, what books do you like to read about Latinx studies? What is a title that has been historically important or that has shaped some discourse in this field of study? I also consulted syllabi online. So if you've had a Latinx history, Latinx studies course and your syllabus is online, there's a good chance that I have looked at it and I looked at the textbooks that you were using. And then really, I also, once I had gathered all these publications, I did a little bit of analysis. I looked at citation counts, and I also looked at their availability in other libraries, just to kind of get an idea of what this collection could be. Ultimately, I reviewed over 750 titles. I still can't believe that number, but it's in 3 years. It's what I looked at, and as of today, there are 283 titles that I've selected and are part of the Latinx Alcove. And to describe a little bit more about the more niche library work, this is what I mean. Well, this is what I mean of citation counts and popularity in terms of availability of publication in other libraries. So I compiled my list and I went one by one and I searched for their citation. I know Google Scholar, the citation number might not be entirely there, but it's a measure. It's a measure you could look at. And of course, I looked at WorldCat, which is an integrated library catalog that connects to all the libraries. If you have an online catalog, it connects to WorldCat. And I looked at how many copies were available and in how many libraries. This was really to kind of get an idea of the reference collection and what it could be, because a reference collection is a jumping off point. It is composed of bibliographies, atlases, general works that tell you about a topic quickly. But I didn't want this space to just be about a reference collection. I wanted users to come into this collection and then get to other points, but I also wanted the alcove to be a destination in itself, a place where users could if they wanted to know what are the most significant publications in the literary Latino tradition, they could go to the Latinx space, and those works were there, and they could quickly consult them. And I tried to achieve that, not just through the collection, but also through developing the space. I tried to bring in features that were authentic to Latinx experience and culture. I knew I wanted it to be a colorful space, just our histories. And for this purpose, I also sought community input. I spoke with users, library users, researchers, students, and I began to create these dialogues about conceptions of space. I also looked at libraries as third places, which is a theory that outlines that, you know, in life you have your first place, which is your home, your second place, which is usually your work, and then people also need a third place. And there's a lot of discourse in the literature about how libraries function and fulfill this need of a third place. I did quite a few field trips to other libraries. I looked at a lot of libraries online. That was one of my favorite parts of this project. As a librarian, I love being in libraries and bookstores. So that was something I did as research for this project. And as I spoke with students, this term of library aesthetics came up. I did not expect this at all, but basically, people have an idea of what a library should look like, and then there's the reality of what these spaces look like. So, for example, the Latinx Alcove, as you can see in the image, it has wooden panels, it has the lighting, the mixture of the space, the built-in shelves, that calls a specific aesthetic. And then newer libraries have more kind of movable furniture and functional or electronic resources. So that was a very interesting concept that came up that I'm just mentioning here because I would like to study it further in my research. And I also had inspiration boards for furniture and decor, as any other millennial with a renovation project. I also opened Pinterest board, and I began compiling images that spoke to what I wanted to see the space to become. And I also pulled from the Southwestern tradition of neon lighting and neon art. And I requested, I requested a sign that would be kind of a feature of the space. And that's the sign that we have here, that I'll show you in the next picture, the next slide. So this is all the ingredients came together, and this is the Latinx Alcove. This is close to what it looks like right now. And it came together with the consideration of the collection development and space development. Another part that I wanted to highlight is the library is probably the strongest in our visual resources for Latinx collections. We have the Misión Gráfica collection from the Bay Area that's been digitized, and I wanted to get some of those facsimiles. I got lots of facsimiles, and I put them here in this newsstand so that users could grab them and learn about them and see them, of course. And so with that, Latinx Alcove came to be, and we had its grand opening this past October 5th. At the library on Thursdays, we have a weekly event that's called Live at the Library, and each Thursday we have a talk or a presentation or an event, and for October 5th, we had an open house, and we welcomed visitors, users to explore the space, and we could chat. We had music, and it was lively time, just to kind of share the space. And what the Latinx Alcove is now is it is a space and reference collection dedicated to Latino studies, a field that centers the Latino experience, histories, and of course Latinidad. And it is composed of books, periodicals, magazines, prints, visual artist prints, as I mentioned. And something that I'm proud to include in this space is current periodicals. So not just material that has been bound and is for reference, but the most recent issues of a magazine are also available in this space. And finally, the goal really is to foster belonging, to create engagement with our users and foster belonging. From here, I really want for this space to continue to be a living collection in space. That means that I'm constantly looking at items, I'm constantly looking at new publications to add to the alcove. I also want to, now that it's finished, I want to do some outreach, maybe some events, maybe a program, conversation with authors, or even research orientations. I would love to have a group, a class, and that is something that I'm exploring. As I mentioned, the web archive component, that is a type of resource, a type of collection that we have begun to build recently. So I am interested in also creating a web archive component to the alcove. And then ultimately, the ongoing effort is also to fill the gaps in the larger national collection. So now that this space exists, I can go and see what's missing in our manuscripts, in our rare books, in our maps, all the different formats that make up the library's collections. And most recently, we shared out the website. So in our part of our Hispanic Reading Room web space, we just added the information about the Latinx Alcove. I share QR codes throughout if you're interested to read them and checking them out. And yeah, I think that's it. That's my time. That's about the Latinx Alcove, how it came to be, the process to get the collection ready, the space ready, and what it is now.